It's like a Nicholas Sparks book.
yeah.
Hello people, welcome back. I've been wanting to do this video for a while now, so I'm so excited for you all to watch it. A little background info. My Meemaw, Janine, was born in 1929, right at the start of the Depression. So for those of you bad at math, that makes her 90. But let me tell you, she does not act 90 or look 90. She's just awesome, and quite frankly, I think I've inherited some very good genes. So Meemaw is the youngest of 6 children. There were 5 girls and 1 boy, so basically I think that makes her brother like a saint or something. With that being said, she's seen and experienced a lot of the history that most of us have only learned about in school. I know that the importance of learning history is ingrained in most of our brains from a young age. There's something about first-hand stories and the small details that we aren't often taught. I hope to bring that experience and those stories out with this video. I hope you learn something new and find my Meemaw as cool as I do. If you want to catch the second part to this video, make sure you subscribe down below so you don't miss it. You ready, lady?
Yeah, I reckon. I didn't know what to expect.
First, you can tell me about if you remember Pearl Harbor.
The first thing that I remember about it, I was 12. I figured it out the other day. And I knew that there was a war in Europe or something, but at that age you don't pay a lot of attention to it. And then I remember it was on a Sunday morning that my daddy always had his ear to the radio, listening to the news, and it came on that Pearl Harbor had been attacked by the Japanese and had destroyed nearly all of our ships. And of course I didn't grasp the seriousness of it then.
Yeah.
Then it wasn't long till President Roosevelt came on the radio and said that we were now in a state of war. Except he said "war." He had a southern accent. There were 6 of us, and of course I was just 12, but my older 2 sisters were engaged at that time, and Irene, my oldest sister, husband-to-be, had just graduated, and then Virginia was going to be married also. So George had to go to Fort Knox and sign up for the draft, and then thought he would get to come home and go back to his family. And they wouldn't even let him leave. He had to stay right then and put on a uniform. And then Charlie, Virginia's husband, had joined the Navy, and they sent him to San Diego, California. So I was young, but I kept up with it, the war, because it affected my family so. And then my brother was 19, I think, or would be 19, and he was in radio school at that time. He had already graduated from high school, and he had to come back and sign up. And since he was in radio already, had a love for that, they sent him to a special radio school so he could learn code. And when he got through with his schooling, they sent him to Africa, and he was at some unknown place there, and he would decode all the messages that came in from the Germans. Just from then on, everything was war news. That was 41, December 41, and then 42 was when my sisters married, my 2 older sisters, and their husbands had to leave. And then Virginia's husband was in the Navy, and he was at San Diego. And of course he was in and out. He would go to sea and then come back to San Diego, but very seldom. And so she got an apartment out there and got a job, so she would be there whenever he could come to the States. And so from then on, he was on a ship, mostly, fighting the Japanese. From then on, I just remember war news. So that's what I remember from 41 until the war was over in 45.
Yeah.
As a boy at school, and he was a senior in high school. And I think his brother was already overseas, and he wanted to get into the service. Everybody was patriotic, all of a sudden they wanted to get in there and fight. And he was halfway through his senior year at high school. You couldn't sign up till you were 18, but he was just 17, but he wanted to go. So he signed up at 17, and they took him. They were taking everybody that they could. And the whole school told him goodbye, I remember, one morning. And everybody was crying, even the boys were crying.
And I think you had said something once about there were like food rations and gas rations.
Oh yeah.
So many stories.
Gasoline was rationed, and well, let's see, my daddy had to drive to work. He was working at the Railway Express, and he had to drive to work every day. And then Mother used the car to sometimes take us from school or to school. They would give you a ration book, and each coupon in it was good for 5 gallons. So the book would have to last you a certain period of time. So it just depended on how saving you were.
Yeah.
If you used them all up, then you didn't have gasoline, so you couldn't drive. But I wasn't old enough to drive.
Yeah.
And I walked to school anyway. Sugar was rationed. And when Mother would hear that maybe Kroger had sugar in, and of course there'd be a big line of people lining up in front of Kroger. And I remember Gloria and I would be late for school. Mother would say, so we had to stand in line to get sugar, and they'd only give you a pound. So Gloria and I would both go so we could get 2 pounds. But there were, there were still 5 at home in our family. Canned goods was rationed. You could just get so many cans. They gave you books that allowed you cans for a certain period of time. So you just had to ration them out yourself, you know. If you wanted more one day, maybe you had to do without the next day. And clothes, shoes. We could only get 1 pair of shoes a year.
Oh gosh, I'd have terrible time.
We had to save ours to get in September, Gloria and I, so that we'd have a pair of shoes to wear to school. And so we wore those to church and to school and everywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember having holes in the bottom of my shoe where I couldn't get more shoes. I put cardboard in my shoes to wear to school. And if it was rainy, they would get kind of soggy when you'd get home. You'd have to take that cardboard out of your shoe. But it was just, you just got used to it. You didn't think about it. Everybody was in the same boat, you know.
That's true.
Even families with a lot of money still could only get 1 pair of shoes. So many groceries that were, like Crisco or things like that. You could get just such a little bit. And coats, maybe you could get a winter coat, but everything was going to the service. So you didn't mind giving it up.
Mom, you told me the other day about troop trains. I had never heard you talk about troop trains before.
Oh yeah, that was right. Every Saturday night, a troop train came through. We knew it was coming through at midnight. And on Saturday morning, the mothers of men in the military and young people would go out to make sandwiches and make bags of sandwiches and cookies, and then they had hot coffee to give the boys as they came through. And then that night we'd go back down to the train station, and because it would stop, but they weren't allowed to get off the train. And they'd open their windows on the train, and we would give them coffee in the window and a sack of food.
Oh, you said something about blackouts? I think Mom told me that.
Well, the blackouts, they'd prepare us for it when we were going to have one. And the siren at certain times, it would usually, it'd be, of course, at night, as soon as it was dark, and then a certain time after dark. And when you heard that siren blowing, you had to get inside your house. Nobody was allowed out on the street, and turn all your lights out. It was to prepare people.
So was it practice or real?
Oh, it was practice, but
for the real thing.
That they thought it could be real. Not likely that it would be here, but it was likely in California and on the coast, because there was a submarine spotted off the coast of Santa Barbara, I think was the city. The American forces destroyed that submarine off the coast of California. And then they also would come off the coast of Miami, Florida, because one year Irene's husband was stationed down there training as a cadet. They were already married in Virginia, and I went down there to visit her. We would go to the beach ordinarily, but one morning we went, and a submarine had, I don't know how they destroyed them, with a torpedo, I guess. right off the coast of Miami, and the oil had washed up on the beach, and we couldn't swim anymore that week because the beach was just destroyed by oil. But that's how close they were coming. If there was anybody suspicious, they called them fifth columnists. There was a couple, and actually he was supposedly a businessman, and found out later that he and his wife were fifth columnists. And I don't know what kind of information they could get that would help in the war. They were German, incidentally, this couple of German descent. And getting information that they could, I don't know what they wanted around here, but to send it in. So they found them. They had their radio set up somewhere. They had a two-way radio, and they would go out there and send by radio wherever they were sending information, which was against our country, of course. And they left town. I don't know what happened to them. You just never knew who was against our country.
The story that Irene used to talk about when Uncle George was, I guess, a cadet, and they were married, and he would sneak out to see her. Where were they? Were they in Miami Beach?
And they were stationed several places till he got all of his cadet training. I guess it was about a year before they sent him overseas. Anyway, the cadets would, every day in formation, they'd march through the streets, and George wasn't allowed to live at home, but they were already married. So he'd march through, and as they would pass her apartment, he would jump out of formation. And it was taking an awful risk, but his buddies would cover up for him. He would stay with Irene until about midnight, I guess, and then he'd sneak back to the base.
He never got caught.
You know, I sometimes think maybe they overlooked it at that time because it was such a critical time, and they realized all these young boys were leaving their wives and families.
I always loved that story when she would talk about him
that's
sneaking
so
out.
It's like a Nicholas Sparks book.
Yeah.
So then he was sent to England. He was an officer then, and he was in charge of a lot of the troops. He was there at the time of D-Day when they invaded France.
Oh yeah, because you said he was like not in charge of that, but he had something to do with the operation.
Oh yeah, he did. Well, that was the beginning of the end. We lost so many of our soldiers during that, and they were just so young when you think of it.
I would just like to let you all know that I have upgraded to a tripod. So basically, I'm like a $15 YouTuber now.